We're live.
Okay. Is Jamie Lowell still with us?
I don't know. Let's see. Oh, look at that. He is.
All right. All right, next topic. One that I don't think enough can be said about it because it's so ridiculous. Kind of gets to the heart of a lot of the nonsense. But today, around the state of Michigan, the round 2 of the pilot project, which allows for officers, funding for officers to do the swab testing.
The old swab.
As a preliminary test to ascertain whether or not an individual is under the, or has a controlled substance in their bloodstream. And this is what we're going to talk about right now. There's and there's a history here. I think it's important to keep it in the context of Michigan law and the way that the state of Michigan has gone about prohibiting and punishing these issues in the past. So let's begin with a little background in history. The prohibitions for driving, and specifically about marijuana or THC in the bloodstream, have been pretty. The laws basically for forever in Michigan have been that they punish any amount of THC that's active in your bloodstream as if it's a drunk driving case. Meaning there's a zero tolerance law in Michigan, and it still exists. And for a long time, up until I think 2008, the metabolite of carboxy THC-11 was even criminalized and considered a controlled substance. Then in 2008, a case called People versus Debra created what is known in the law as a stare decisis, a significant change in the law. And they took in and analyzed all the scientific studies that said specifically that there is no, there's nothing associated with the metabolite of carboxy THC, the after effect of metabolized inactive chemical associated with THC that should be criminalizing anyone. And so they deem that is no longer a controlled substance, and just having that in your bloodstream in and of itself cannot result in criminal charges. And the reason why that decision was so important is because prior to that, just having carboxy THC, just the metabolite, was enough because it meant that you'd smoke marijuana at some time. And the suggestion was that the metabolite itself could cause impairment. So that's the premise of Michigan lawmaking from a criminal perspective. And that would be the law, but for the Supreme Court making that ruling. Now, since that time, and not to be confusing here, all that case of Dare did was not criminalize carboxy THC. Moving forward, the Michigan Medical Marijuana Act was passed, obviously, and it's even mentioned, I think, in the opinion of Dare. But ultimately, it was litigated on this kind of issue, and it got to the Supreme Court in the case of People versus Kuhn, where they stated that for medical marijuana patients, they're not subject to the existing laws because of the MMA. They're not subject to zero tolerance, that if they're in compliance, under Section 4, the statute is very clear that they are immune from the zero tolerance, and only if there's evidence of them being impaired associated with the cannabis use would such a type of charge of impaired driving or operating under the influence be warranted. And since that case, there's not been any situation that I'm aware of that anyone can point to a significant increase in traffic fatalities, traffic accidents, because these patients were somehow not subject to the same penalties as every other citizen. We're only talking about 300,000 people, but the remaining 7 million plus still subject to zero tolerance. But well, how or why could that be? The patients, the sick people that are using cannabis, and nothing remarkable that could be pointed to. And trust me, if it existed, then we would hear the arguments that it existed. So moving forward into the modern era, moving out of the MMA era. We've gone through the MMFLA, which did not address this particular topic. But as we know, the recreational law, which passed November and then enacted in December of 2018, identifies this particular issue in that it creates a new law that says that a adult 21 years of age or older who is driving a motor vehicle and has even active THC, not smoking in the vehicle, I'm not talking about that, but has active THC, is not subject to the crime of zero tolerance, but instead would have to, like a medical marijuana patient, the requirements of proving impairment, not just having any amount in your blood, but actually proving impairment for an adult, is what the recreational or MRMA proscribes. I've heard prosecutors make the suggestion that if there's actual smoking that's taking place within the cab of the vehicle, that because that's not allowed, specifically prohibited, that for reasons I don't agree with, you then fall out of the recreational law and back into the traffic code.
$100 fine.
Well, we would agree with that, Jim, and I think everyone in here would, but maybe we'll see what Shyler sees. I mean, he's got a different opinion. I'm just curious. He may have a different opinion. But there's an argument that is being made. I think it's been published. Paul Bernier, we talked about it in the show here. You know, he's in the organization of the Attorney General who they've come up with, you know, some of the things they find to be confusing with the penalties. They're not specifically prescribed. And this is an argument that was used for the MMA. If you are outside of the immunity of Section 4, you divert back to the felony penalties associated with the Public Health Code. The logic that's being used here was, in that instance, the MMA didn't legalize marijuana, created immunities for a small class of people for behavior that would otherwise be illegal. But recreational marijuana says the intention of this law is to legalize marijuana for adults over the age of 21. So that's the intention. It was to legalize it. So anyways, I don't know that that's an interpretation that's valid. What were we talking about? Just kidding. I know we're talking about the history now, and I'm getting to the sobriety test. But as we talk about the recreational law, that's what the law says. It changes the dynamics of who can be charged with a crime. Zero tolerance is no longer the standard. Actual impairment associated with driving should be the standard.
Yeah.
And that's not in debate, and the debate would be if there's something that was taking place that would somehow, that's not punished within MRMA, that would divert back to, I don't know, the non-recreational law, and they'd be subject to the existing penalties. But along the way, the state of Michigan has made attempts to create mechanisms or investigate mechanisms of what the law should be. As many states that have gone through the legalization of recreational marijuana, the issue of should there be a per se number associated with the driving of people within, you know, who are using cannabis. And there's a number of different studies that have spoken to this particular issue, both funded from the federal government, other or objective groups, I say, that have no, and all of them come back, no matter where it is.
A state chartered committee.
State Chartered Committee of Michigan also likewise came back, and their conclusions were that there is no number that can be assigned with a criminal per se amount, and instead the better approach to this would be to utilize the drug recognition evaluation methods that are, we'll talk about in a minute, but that's a better way to go than having a per se amount. And while I agree that no per se amount would be appropriate under any circumstances, and while I'm very antagonistic to the credibility of these drug recognition evaluators, I do think that of the choices on this particular topic, if one has to be made, and I don't know that one should, but if one is being forced, we are left with the drug recognition evaluators. Now, the point that I want to make was that the committee itself, created by the state of Michigan, and just another one, for example, the AAA Insurance Company, which is not a small entity, they both concluded that there is no per se amount that can happen, that should be legislated and used to criminalize. Now, with that being said, you'd think the state of Michigan would have taken some steps already to remove from our criminalized statutes the zero tolerance, right? If the committee that they have employed to give them an answer of what the per se number should be, and they say there should be none, and there's existing laws that are punishing for 1 nanogram, and that their own investigative research says that's not something that should be per se a crime, that they should be removing those laws from the books. Anyone disagree with that?
No.
That hasn't happened. And it's hypocritical and just shows the lack of integrity or honesty that's really being addressed here. Now, what has taken place since then? Well, the state of Michigan, in an attempt to add investigative tools, so-called investigative tools, to the determination of who may be impaired or not, has now on their second round of a pilot project with the swab testing. Does everyone know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
Okay. So the program had been in effect, I think, January through March of this year, the first time. And it was reported on in a study that was produced by the state government, and we can talk about that in a minute. But understand that this swab testing is intended to determine if there are other controlled substances that are being used as well, not just cannabis. But we should talk about the cannabis for a second, because to me, it's, with the background I just gave you, it seems to be something that is still not none of the information that's being used to get to where we are is substantiated by data. I mean, it just doesn't exist, okay? I mean, the argument about the Kuhn case and that there's no significant increase that anyone can point to because patients are smoking marijuana or using cannabis anywhere. And the premise of the study begins with all these different references to other types of accidents that took place. And I don't know that any of them are directly linked to the sole use of cannabis, period. And or the driving being impaired or an impediment because of the use of cannabis. Now, just looking at the data for the use of THC and what is taking place there, understand that the pilot project was first funded for, I think, 5 counties, right? Is that right? Those 3
Right,
months.
yeah.
And the oral fluid roadside analysis was published in February. Okay. So the history of this particular machine, and it's like what is it called? What's it called? I don't know. I'll come of it. It's a special type of. It's a portable. Yes, it's the. Does it matter the menu? Oh yeah, the Alere DD52. I had to go through it. Alere. Okay, so they've got some manufacturer that makes this particular machine that, you take a swab, you put it in a machine, and it checks it. It's portable. Okay, so the only way that in the way it's been funded is that the person that is giving the particular test at the roadside has to be a drug recognition evaluator. Meaning they have to have gone to the 2-week class to get trained in testifying about drug recognition evaluators and passing whatever, attending and and then getting a certification. This program, by the way, is a program that was created by the Chief of Police Association. So this whole concept of the DRE and the 12 or 13 steps that they're going to run you through is not something that is scientifically established either. It's something that they're attempting to use to make an arrest and then draw blood. And only in those instances would this use of the oral fluid roadside analysis be being used as well. In other words, the only time that the oral fluid roadside test was being given, or the swab testing, was when it was being given by a DRE or a drug recognition evaluator, which means all of the arrests that were based upon that are reported here in this report of 2019 February includes not just the swab test, but whatever the DRE evaluator came up with. So it's a combination of those two things, okay? You wouldn't have one without the other. So any time they were wrong that the swab test was inaccurate, at the same time, it's a proclamation that the DRE was wrong as well. See what I'm saying? And the to me, what is so, when you talk about the science and the testing and anything that's going to be used against people, you want it to be somewhat accurate. You want to have some kind of reliability. You want a scientific community to adopt it and understand that it's some kind of accuracy. Now, in the law, you can imagine the types of evidence that has been attempted to be admitted into court and has been admitted to court only years later to find out that it's not as accurate as they thought it was. Bite mark, hair follicle evidence. I mean, people sit in prison 80s and 90s because this is a scientific thing that the FBI came up with, and then they said, oops, it's really not as accurate as we thought it was. So out of not that, but other cases, there's a standard by which scientific conclusions or evidence or so-called experts can opine and give and rely upon certain data, and it's a case called Dauber or Fry, and it puts forth a examination of whatever the underlying expert opinion is and begs the question of, is this readily accepted within the scientific community? Is there an error rate? Can we say that it's accurate to a certain degree? Can it be, can that result be produced over and over and over again? Take this sample and run it through the same machine by someone with the same education. Would you get the same results? And can you identify it, within a error rate? And these are just the things that go on in any kind of scientific testing you would expect. So it's interesting that when they publish the data here, what is it really saying? And the first thing you have to understand is that this particular machine was studied in Tulsa, Oklahoma. It was a 4-person test sample of people running around. They used it on 4 people, and the conclusions of that particular 4-person study out of Tulsa, which is the basis why Michigan took it on for the January, was inconclusive. So you have what's the history of the oral fluid roadside analysis? Well, Tulsa's testing said, we don't know. It's not clear to us. There's not enough people. So Michigan's like, we're going to be the guinea pig here, and got the funding. And they produced this report here, which no matter what anyone says, and here we are going forward with another $600,000 funding for it, this particular program concludes we're inconclusive. We're not sure. We need more money, and we need to do more of it. Okay? So you have 2 times that's gone around. We still don't have any kind of, let's say, data that it is actually working, or that they can show that it's working, and they just need more. Now, I would even argue that it's not that they don't have enough data to show that it's working, that the evidence that they have presented in the report in 2019 makes the case that it's not working. And it's not only not working, but it shows the flaws in the DRE. What am I talking about? Well, I could go through this thing and break it down 1,000 different ways, but there's a couple of things that stand out, easy to identify. Number one, they are discussing a lot of different things, and they conflate different ideas, and that may be sounding not objective. Let me try to be objective. The language that they use in this report begins with the idea that while we understand that blood testing, the drawing of blood, is the gold standard for science testing. It's better than urine. It's better than breath. If you're going to go through the 3 of them, it's something you can do and run through a GCMS and identify different, you can quantify. It's easier to quantify than just identify the substance, as we know. And so they begin the process with that blood is the gold standard, meaning that between the 2 of whatever they're coming up with, the fluid and the DRE, they'd rather have blood. That's the real. So in the 72 arrests that are reported in the program, there are 11 times that the person who was arrested for having THC in their blood, which means they used the swab test, and the person doing the swab test was a DRE, drug recognition evaluator, and they concluded after the evaluations that with the swab test and the testing that they had probable cause to arrest them and get a warrant or tell them under the Michigan implied consent law that you're under arrest for impaired driving and you have to submit to a breath, blood, or urine test, which they're going to draw blood. If you don't, we're going to get a search warrant. And if you refuse, they're going to get a search warrant anyways, and you're subject to losing your license for 6 months, first offense. You get a right to hearing, but they're difficult. It's an administrative hearing. You don't have a right to jury trial. Nevertheless, That is what takes place. And of the times, 11 of the 72 where they made those arrests using the combination of the DRE and the saliva, turned out that the blood had no THC in it. There was nothing in the blood. So 72 times, 11 of them were false positives. And not just that the fluid testing was false, it means that the drug recognition evaluator. No, well, there's another. I saw that, but there's another section which I want to point out.
Oh, I didn't see that one.
I'll show you where that is. Hold on. There's. I know that's very clear. It's 5 out of what they say 70. They recognize false positives, right? 5 of the 70.
Yeah, false positives after blood test.
Right, but there is. No, it says overall performance of the instrument is good with results in the immediate sample. Apart from the positive on-site test results, which showed a presence of THC in 11 samples that were not present in the blood. Do you understand what I'm saying? They actually try to make the argument here that this testing procedure is so good. This is the quote that I pulled out of it, and it's somewhere in here. Okay, I can show you, but it's in the. But what they're trying to say is that our procedures of the swab testing and the DRE are so effective that 11 times of 72, the swab test and the DRE recognized someone had THC in their system, but the blood didn't show it. Wow. Do you understand what I'm saying? This is antagonistic to their initial proclamation at the beginning that blood is the gold standard. They've circumvented that principle and said, and it's problematic because it does not. It is very, very subjective, obviously. And this is the point I'm trying to make. If they are trying to make the case that they were successful 11 times when it's evidence not of success but evidence of a failure, right. An absolute failure that they're falsely reporting. And let's just talk about this for a second. It is a civil infraction to refuse, just like it is a civil infraction to refuse a preliminary breath test. Now, a preliminary breath test is the portable machine that they would bring to the roadside. If you refuse it, it's probably being offered to you after several other field sobriety tests, that some of which have been deemed standardized field sobriety tests and tests that have been recognized by the National Highway Safety Commission to be indicative in some capacity, giving indicators of what might be maybe impairment from alcohol. There's no similar tests that have been identified by any organization other than the chief of police relative to being effectuated by a controlled substance other than alcohol. And none of the traditional field sobriety tests that we would think of, walking the line and touching your nose and 1, 2, 3, 4, 4, 3, 2, 1, whatever it is, are indicative of the use of cannabis. They're totally different functions within the human system that are effectuated, and the use of the horizontal gaze nystagmus is also not something that's ever been identified as being, and that is whether there's smooth pursuit of your eyes moving laterally with certain types of passing of the pen. And it's true that if someone is intoxicated, that there will be a lack of smooth pursuit. That's unequivocal. That's one of the things that, and I think that the more, the higher the alcohol rate, there's more established evidence that it's happening, the lower levels. But at the same time, there's no medical literature that supports police officers doing a horizontal gaze nystagmus test, because the lack of smooth pursuit, which is what they're looking for in the eye, is also indicative of like 55 other possible head trauma or diseases or whatnot that they're not aware of. It could be, a number of different things. So, but even with that said, if anything, it's related to alcohol. It is not related to the cannabis in someone's system. And if someone is decreeing that they have lack of smooth pursuit and they're suggesting that cannabis is the cause of their THC, it's either they're reporting it falsely or there's some other mechanism within their eye movements that is much more severe than having THC in their blood. But even putting that aside, there is some. I understand there's some value in the convergence, lack of convergence, which is when they move the pen into the middle of the nose and the eyes will follow to go like cross-eyed, and they'll pop out. That's the thing. I don't know. We could all. Some people may be able to know someone that can try that in the maybe one of the other offices down here.
Yeah.
But and I don't know. But I think the natural reaction the first or second time is that people's eyes are going to do that anyways. I mean, there's vague, if anything, but nothing else in the manual of DRE, which include the 12 to 13 steps of which they involve with, which include things like taking the temperature and blood pressure, okay, along the path. All right, so here we are. We've got this fluid testing that at best is inconclusive. Furthermore, the hardest thing that no one's recognizing is that any of the other substances that would fall on the controlled substance list that someone's has a script for, there's no per se number. You know what I mean? Like someone could be on prescribed Oxycontin or Percocet, whatever, some other Schedule 3, 2, whatever, 4, and the doctor, I don't think any of the medications, someone tell me if I'm wrong, say do not drive. It says, titrate or, use with caution, caution, or someone may say don't use heavy equipment. Some of them may say that.
Right. Don't operate a motor vehicle.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
While using.
Okay. But that's always vague enough. It doesn't, because if this is true, then they would, upon prescribing the medication, there'd be a trigger that you can't drive. You lose your license. You have to choose between one or the other. So it's not and there is no per se number, right? So when you draw this, if they draw an analysis, they determine someone has some controlled substance in their system, which, could come up as some other substance that they, it's not delineated, and they draw their blood and it's whatever the levels are, it's nearly impossible for them to say that it's not a level that is equivalent to the doctor's, recommended therapeutic levels. You know what I mean? There's no numbers on the board of how much Oxycontin for 100 milligrams, 200 milligrams, whatever someone's taking per day, what that in the law would be is defined as automatically impaired. So I don't know. So short answer is, if subject to one of these tests at the roadside, understand that it is not a crime if you refuse it. It's a civil infraction. I also think that, but in the context of what we're talking about, like a preliminary breath test, if they're offering this to you, it's after they probably put you through a bunch of field sobriety tests, which, again, as I said, for cannabis have no bearing, but this is what is supposed to happen. Your refusal of the test should result in a civil infraction, but at that point, your refusal they may take as evidence of being impaired if they found the other things that led up to that particular juncture as to be evidence of you being impaired. But I don't know. Who knows at this point? I don't know if they're starting with the oral swab or they're, it's a beginning. Oh, you got this. Now we're going to get deeper into it. Or they put you through the field sobriety test first and determine by those observations before they. That's an interesting question, right? You'd almost want, I think it's almost, you'd want to do almost like a blind study on that, Jim. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
How many times did, because the DRE evaluations are obviously flawed, and you'd hate to think that if the fluid shows up positive on the swab and the officers want to rely upon it, if they may not be, predisposed to want to see the same conclusions that they just pulled out of this portable machine.
Of course, that's what's happening. Of course, that is. I mean, it's an easy out for them. They've got science now, supposedly, but with an error rate like that, it's not very good science.
Well, we don't know that there's an error rate. I don't know that there's ever been. I mean, we just came up with from their own studies. I don't know.
Their study says that there's a massive error.
Massive error rate.
1 out of 7.
1 out of 7, and that is not.
Those aren't good odds.
Those are not good odds, and they would not pass under any circumstances for admissibility. Now, the PBT is also not admissible in court.
Right.
Now, these other field sobriety testing types of preliminary tests, likewise, PBT civil infraction, this civil infraction. This type of thing may
Yeah,
not
but
be admissible in court.
It's
okay?
not apples to apples, though, because they're going to drag you down to the hospital and they're going to force a draw.
Here you go.
of
Let me
your
say it
blood.
this way. I know. I agree with you. The use of the preliminary breath test is not for the purposes of substantiating the person's alcohol level. It is to determine probable cause.
Right.
And because of that, it's not admissible at the trial.
Yeah.
It is
But
used
it gets you back to the data master.
That is admissible because that's something that, if they can lay the foundation that it's been properly kept and calibrated. But the reason why the PBT is not admissible is because it does not meet the threshold of accuracy to be admitted as substantive evidence. Okay, so like my argument that these things are unreliable would fall on deaf ears to whoever visited the preliminary breath test as a
Yeah, but I mean,
theoretic-
as unreliable as the PBT is, I do believe that it's fairly accurate in detecting some level of alcohol.
right. Well,
And
they
this,
also
this isn't even accurate to that point.
The
It's
key word is some amount
Right.
of alcohol.
right.
well, let me say this. There's a method by which they calibrate the machine. Unlike the breathalyzer, Data Master, which require weekly testing and using a pure sample of 0.8 alcohol and pouring it, and if the machine's working 100%, it would be a 0.8 printout. There's a certain level of error that they allow, 0.76, 0.84, in certain direction. Anything beyond that, not accurate.
Right.
Doesn't work. They have to adjust the machine, call the manufacturer, could be, or fix it till it produces that particular result. And there's a requirement of the logging of these particular things. Likewise, the preliminary breath test has monthly, certain. It's not weekly testing. It's monthly. That's what it is. And because that, it does not deem to be as accurate. So there's no accuracy. We don't know how many times this has been false positive within their own data. They should be able to come forward and say, we've done some closed studies on this.
Well, they have, and they're putting people in jail.
No, they used citizens out on the street. That's
That's
not.
what I'm saying. That's the test. They're testing it, and they're throwing people in jail, and then they're forcing a draw of blood against their will, and some of them haven't even committed any sort of crime.
Isn't that problematic? Like the PBT, they were able to take people who would be in a control group and have them drink a certain amount of alcohol and have them test at different times as they knew the body would absorb into the, and see how often. And they'd bring out people that weren't drinking, and
Right.
and the testers would not know per se, and they'd be able to form some kind of. But
Yeah.
here, there's none of that with
That's the point.
identifiable people
It's
that.
junk science. No self-respecting scientist would say that this was an accurate and worthwhile device. The only thing it's going to do is throw innocent people in jail. That's it.
So the departments that are participating in this go around is so an appropriation of $626,000 for the extension of the oral fluid analysis pilot program was included in the supplemental funding bill that became Public Act 618 of 2018, and the Michigan legislature agreed to support the expansion of this testing and continue into 2019 in the ongoing funding of this project. And I don't know. So, and then they expanded it from the 5 counties that existed before. And this time through, there's a number of other long list here of
Yeah.
many.
Yep.
The glove has become bigger. Yeah, it's wide ranging, and University of Michigan Police Department. That's
Super.
They're going to have a lot of opportunities.
Super duper. This is bullshit.
How do you?
This doesn't even indicate impairment. It just indicates presence, and this is absolute and utter bullshit. So what do? They take you back to the hospital. They draw your blood, and there's no per se limit. So they just basically say, well, it was in their blood, and we attest to the fact that there was poor driving, and it must have been the weed.
Well, what about their observations after you pulled them out of the car? Was it that you can tell this jury, Mr. Officer, about your observations? Well, I ran them through my DRE tests, which begin by, I look in their eyes and I do these tests that aren't indicative. Or I was told by the Chief of Police Association that if I do these things and I observe these things, then that's what they mean. And so I'm here as an expert. Look at my badge.
Yeah.
But do you understand how?
It's a flash.
How it's I'm saying from. So here's the dilemma. This is an issue, right? And I say this is an issue because every state has done something relative to this in some capacity, right?
Yep.
I mean, we're kind of, in the grand scheme of things, I think in another world, we'd already have a per se number. The idea that there's some.
I still think we will.
Okay, that's fine, right? Because they won't give up until they get some kind of right. So. But I don't know. I mean, the story out of this commission that was examining whether there should be a per se one was that many months before their conclusion, they said there's no number, and they said try again, right? They weren't ready to accept it. Whoever the powers that be, they didn't want to accept that. So I would agree that there's a desire to do that. But at the same time, we're relying on. If that's not, the answer, which I don't think it is.
It isn't the answer. It's ridiculous.
So what is the answer? Because the answer is not nothing. I think it should be
simple.
What is it?
It's proved there was bad driving.
By what way?
Well, how about the dash cam that's in almost every police car?
Not always available, but I understand.
Whatever. Make it available, and if it's not available, then
But then you have the police officer testimony, and trust me, the combination of somebody that has a limited amount of alcohol in their blood that may be able to drive, and the testimony of the officer they were swerving, didn't, whatever, it carries the day all the time.
Yeah.
Okay, so you don't need a dash cam. They could say they swerved. They could say they're driving slow, that they didn't turn their signal on. These are all things associated, and they can and just throw that out there. Okay, and then see what I'm saying? The bad driving is, you could be going down a road that is bumpy. Yeah, the officer sees you swerve to miss a bump, or
Sure.
The road, hilly on one side or whatever. And there's thousands of different things that can happen that have nothing to do with the person's impairment. They may not be paying attention, which is not an excuse. They may not be paying attention because they're high. I don't know. They could because they're drunk. It could be because they're just not paying attention because they're looking at their phone, which is equally as, I'm saying, equally more a legitimate concern than equal. You know what I mean? It's more of a...
yes.
The texting.
But okay, so...
but it's still better than a per se number. Would you agree with
100%. And as far as I'm concerned, I would much rather, from a lawyer's perspective, fight the officer and his opinions than the per se jury instruction that's read to the jurors. Because this is how it goes. In drunk driving cases, there's always two charges that the defendant is facing. If there's a breath alcohol level greater than 0.08, even 0.07, it's the following. One, that the defendant had a breath alcohol level greater than the legal limit at the time they were driving. So that is a per se. And there's a jury, part of the jury instruction says that if you believe that the test is accurate, you can presume that it was accurate at the time they were driving. Okay? So you are so the only way you can win on that count, which is a drunk driving, it's one of the ways that get you, is to undo the accuracy of the test. Okay? And they show up with 2 tests and a badge and some stuff, and they don't know, the jurors don't know anything about what they're talking about. But in the folklore of life, as I've mentioned in the past, the ongoing contemplation, 0.08 is something that people understand to be drunk. They don't know why. It's been, it's a
number.
It's a number that has been impressed upon the minds of people, even though they have no idea how you get there or what the machine does to get us there. So, with that being said, we look at the other circumstance here of what the other part of the charge would be, and that would be the issue of whether or not the alcohol in their system effectuated their ability to drive the motor vehicle, which is a completely different type of factual and legal argument. You're not fighting with the data master operator and their certifications and whether the machine is calibrated. You're talking about the facts on the road and who's telling the truth and whatnot. And both of those are difficult because you have the duality of a person driving and a police officer, public safety, and as other types of charges, by the nature of the type of charge it is, it has certain people, certain people view those things like, without equivocation. I use the example of resisting and obstructing a police officer. Some people could never even understand maybe why somebody could do that, and that they shouldn't. They should just, submit. Some people see a police officer testifying that somebody is, intoxicated and driving, and they don't know, and this guy, man or woman is making the case there. They fear this kind of behavior. They want public safety to be out there protecting them in the roads and whatnot. And they know all these stories of things that are, they don't really know about, but they hear about. So it's, Mothers Against Drunk Driving, is an organization that is, bred a lot of bad stories about people that are drinking within the organization.
Very powerful, very powerful lobby too.
And, they sit down in these courts, the back row, and, judges know that they're there. I mean, so, but as we sit here, as I look in terms of that, something is going to happen, and the choice of a per se number, as we're talking about, that is difficult when, the testing machine that's going to be used is going to be like a machine that has accuracy, right?
Right.
And the question is not going to be so much whether or not they can, whether it's accurate, it's just that they got the number, I'm not conceding that anything that the MSP does is accurate. I certainly don't think their blood testing, the way they do it now, is accurate. But the other way that it currently exists, or it should exist under MRTMA, is that they would have to prove impairment by drug recognition evaluators, not experts, evaluators. And from my perspective, I'd rather have, from a lawyer on behalf of someone, I'd rather have that than the other. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Because, I don't know. I mean, I think, in the end, truth and science would like to win. If you got a chance to argue about actual, accuracy and whatnot, and provability. We're still at the early phases. I think that there is a folklore, a negative stereotype associated with driving and cannabis still, right? I don't know that it's warranted. I don't know that there's data that supports it. I said the lack of being able to point to something remarkable that's happened to the 300,000 patients in Michigan that seemingly can go about their business without causing accidents all over the place would be something that would be quite telling. But there's an uphill battle. So I'm glad we've had a group discussion about this, and we're ready to move on. Just kidding. Does anyone want to talk? I've been going on for a little bit there. Sorry.
Well, how do you think this will fare in the courts? I mean, if there's no science behind it, can't you win? Isn't it, or is the system just?
Well, the blood tests aren't broke. That's the problem.
Yeah.
I think the problem is it's going to be used in the same context as field sobriety tests in the PBT, right? So you get pulled over and they're suspicious, and they're going to ask you to do either the test and then do the DRE evaluations, or they're going to do the DRE evaluations, have you take that, and that's going to. And if you say no to the fluid, they'll just say, okay, but I got you in the DRE or whatever, and they'll arrest you. Now, that determination is something that will be challenged later on, but they've now arrested you. The next phase is, now that you've been, in their eyes, arrested, you have to submit to their request to take either a breathalyzer, urine, or blood test. If you take any one of those three, you have a right to have an independent test taken, and they have to provide it for you. You have to pay for it, but it's something to think about for those that may be in this situation. But Jim's point is, once they have your blood, now they have a number of some kind, right?
Yep.
Now, the number is not a per se number,
Doesn't matter.
but it's going to get admitted into evidence. And it's like...
And the
it's like,
cop is going to say there was bad driving, and that number is why.
Right. And you know what else is on these lab reports? They still have the carboxy-THC, which is always like in the hundreds. It's always like the opposite. It's like, if it's 4 and like 100, at some point it was, and it just looks like a bad number, but it's kind of like, and I plan to argue this, it's kind of like could be synthetic THC. It's like it's on this form with no legal significance. In fact, the Derer case said it has no legal significance. Its presence there can't be of any value. It has no
Right.
competent value for anyone that's going to see it other than to inflame by putting a number that's greater than the number at issue. Of you know what I mean?
But also with no rate of error listed.
No rate of error listed, but even testimony that we have it. Don't we find it? It's like 30% is what the MSP
25%
error
plus
rate.
or minus.
Yeah. So that that's
It's not
on
good.
one test. That's on one test.
It's not good.
Meaning they don't have a second test. As was I talking about this earlier? If I'm repeating myself, it's just because I'm getting old and senile. But as an expert that I'd used many times in the past, this guy Carl Ebner is a pharmacologist and toxicologist. He would look at this lab report that had one number, 14. You know, it doesn't even have a decimal point. It's not even like within science is 0.00, 0.07 or something. You know, just a number like 14. Okay, so
It's got 14 weed.
right 14 THC, like not even like 14.00 whatever. So and
14 weeks.
and he would say to the jury, if well, he said to me and I said to the jury, if we're here, ladies and gentlemen, you're trying to pick a sharpshooter and you're going to gamble on sharpshooting here. Number of people come out before you and you got to decide who you're going to put your money on, and they're each taking time in the warm up or whatever, and the first person goes and they shoot and hit a bullseye. Are you going to put all your money on that person then? Of course not. You're going to ask them to shoot again. See if they hit the bullseye again. Just because they hit the wall doesn't mean that's the bullseye, right? The next time they shoot, it could be pew over there. Not even close to it. At least make them identify what the bullseye is and hit it again. You know what I mean? So, and one number is the opposite of that, and they've been getting away with this without any. The basics of the science is that you should be able to reproduce the same results over and over and over again under the same conditions, with the same personnel, same education, same machines, and they don't even support that. But this is how it's been going. It's kind of like cash bond system, and 40% of the lab being used to test marijuana while the rape kits sit on the shelves, and
Yeah.
the a little bit of no freedom on the checkers board got lifted up, so now there's like a little bit of freedom, and they got to come up with the government's going to make $160 and stick something in your mouth whether you like it or not. But they're getting their $160 at a minimum. I mean, that's what this is to me. It's a total.
I'll pay the $160. They're not sticking anything in my mouth.
All right, commentary. Let's go. Come on. Who's in favor of it? Tommy? Just kidding. Why are you in favor? That's
Tommy.
ridiculous. You seem like rational. Just kidding. Deborah? What's the crazy about the driving? Am I
No, I totally agree with you.
the story of it is, there's a person whose family had a family tragedy. Let me see what
It
this
had
is.
nothing to do with marijuana.
Right.
It was some other type
It
of
was
stuff, right?
pills.
Right. What's the guy's name? Swift, I think.
I don't remember, but
I don't wanna make light of it. It's,
it was horrible. But the irony of this whole thing is that this program was not powered supposedly by marijuana. It was based on a driver that was under the influence of some sort of some sort of pill, some narcotic, and it was just an easy way for them to sneak cannabis in there. And here we are.
I mean, you asked me about what the law is. If this is what's going to happen in the law, the way this is being sold is this is a less invasive way. Like, we shouldn't have to get a warrant. We shouldn't have to draw blood. We shouldn't have to get a phlebotomist. We shouldn't have to take 2 to 3 weeks to get these results. This is immediate, gives us feedback, blah, blah, blah. But that's not...
It gives you shitty data.
It doesn't give you any response, and it's not going to be used for those reasons. It's going to be used
Right.
to get blood anyways. See what I'm
Right.
saying? It's a
Right.
probable cause. So, it's a lot of misrepresentations and conflation on the way it really plays out in the place that we like to call where the rubber meets the road, where the government is interacting with citizens and their freedom to be free and be without government intrusion, and the government's belief that they have a just cause in interfering where those rubber and road meets is, you know, a battle that goes on like Tom and Jerry and the Roadrunner and the Coyote, I guess, you know, and the court systems, while are inundated with these kind of issues, I don't think we're ever intended to be involved with this kind of stuff. And only because our government is out of control and financing themselves off the back of citizens and making things up and creating laws and, you know, criminalizing and penalizing things.
It's all fear mongering. I mean, you look at the data, and if people driving under the influence of marijuana was really a problem, we would have been hearing about this shit long before now. And it just happens that marijuana becomes legal and more accepted, and now it's a problem. And yet they still cannot pull any realistic data that supports their position. I would concede that there are some times when someone, especially someone that has not consumed marijuana before or in a very long time, could become so inebriated that they would not be able to drive. But that does not apply to most users of cannabis, and it's unfair to paint them with such a wide brush.
There may be situations where people who are not familiar with in the recreational market, who may take a dose of something that they didn't titrate with.
Right.
We get those situations. People.
But usually those people are so inebriated
they don't get
that
in
they
the
don't
car.
get behind the wheel of a car. They go.
Right.
They lay down.
Exactly.
Well, there could be situations where there's a delay kick in.
Then
You know.
they
kick in
will
while you're
usually
driving.
stop the
Yeah.
car.
Okay.
Whoa, okay.
But I'm
Pull
saying-
over here.
I agree, but you know, there's always. I don't know. I mean,
It's not
a
like
thing that, right.
alcohol where you get
I know.
all this courage and say, "Oh, I'm fine. I can drive." It's not the same.
Or that there's identifiable factors that have been documented that a certain level of alcohol and certain body size impact the person's motor skills to react, and there's delays. I mean, some people may it affects differently, but there's certainly it's a depressant. There's identifiable
It's a
characteristics.
central nervous depressant. It definitely impairs your ability to drive a vehicle. Marijuana does not act the same way. It just doesn't.
There's a level that impairs your ability to drive.
I don't know.
I mean,
that-
I'm saying of alcohol. Of alcohol.
Of alcohol. I was
Sure.
gonna. Yeah, alcohol. Yes.
Alcohol, yes.
But marijuana, I don't. I mean, if there's data, then let's talk about the data. But all the data we see does not speak to this horrible impairment that law enforcement seems to think occurs. It's really bizarre to me.
Yeah, we are living in a time when I don't know, and I think when we pull all this back, we see how much the law enforcement community impacts the policy decisions that are made in the legislature.
Yeah.
Right? I never realized that until my involvement with cannabis activism
Yeah.
and finding reaching out to legislatures and looking for.
They lobby the legislators. That was never the intent, but that is definitely what happens. And then you get, senators like Senator Rick Jones, that are former law enforcement that definitely, are sympathetic to what they're saying, and you get policy like this. I mean, I don't think that if you ask Peter Lucido if it was his intent to go against the recommendation of the committee, that he would say yes. And I think that's our only potential saving grace when they try to implement a per se limit, is that man going to bat and saying that's not what the committee said, the science doesn't support this. But now they're making these boneheaded decisions about these damn units. I don't know. It's not a good sign.
We didn't get a chance to talk about the the Lucido bill that involves the lab, and I think tomorrow's the vote, as far as we know. What percent of bill is it? Did we decide? We didn't get to that, did we?
No.
All right.
No,
We did go through a full 2 hours though, and it's 10 o'clock right now.
we
Oh,
did.
is it really?
Yeah.
did.
See,
Wow.
that means you're having
Last
fun.
one yeah.
Damn.
It's good. It's good. I mean, not the government. The government is not good, but the show's good, so that's good.
I obviously was playing the role, as I like to, of conversational terrorist, and it's not that fun. No, just kidding.
That's
It
pretty
didn't
funny.
really let. Does anyone want to go on for a little bit? Please take the floor. Somebody.
I think you did an excellent job. I don't know what else to add.
Shyler would say otherwise, but he left.
He's
he
not
left.
here.
He's not here. He's just...
No, he's still here.
Yeah, he's
He's still here.
He's hiding out. He's
Chris, you've been quiet tonight. I have
I
not
know.
put you on the spot or anything. You got any commentary? I know.
I have no feedback at this time.
We did get into a little bit of a topic that I kept
Sour
saying.
Patch Kids.
That's good. That's fine. Wasn't there something that we would like? Was there something on this we talked about? I said, let's save it till we go back on there. And I don't know if it was in any of these areas. Was it? Do you remember what it was? It doesn't matter.
I think we touched on everything
Okay.
we discussed earlier.
I have a few
Except for
things
the,
to rattle
the
off.
deference stuff.
Jamie Lowell.
Well, Jamie's still here.
Jamie Lowell, the person responsible for everything, still hanging in there.
Still hanging in there.
Still hanging in there.
I've been waiting.
Trooper.
Patiently.
Wow.
I'd like to award Jamie the award of patience right now. Jamie Lowell, please come forward and
What does that
collect
look
your
like?
award. Right. Go ahead.
Just a few things going on this week. Tomorrow night, Rick and I with Thompson and I will be in Northport to offer a presentation with a contrary view to that of Don Bailey, who offered up his presentation in the same place last month. And
What is that city? Say that city again so people can show up and.
Northport. Northport. It's just north of Traverse City.
Did Don Bailey recommend they immediately approve recreational marijuana
course.
facilities?
He said if I were you guys, I would utilize every square inch available to offer this
Yes.
activity.
I figured.
Really
That's
take
exactly
advantage.
what he said.
I figured that's what he would say.
Yeah,
Wow.
that's exactly how it's going down.
Okay, so we got Don Bailey versus Jamie Lowell and Rick Thompson in a mud fight. Go ahead, mud wrestling. Go ahead.
Yeah, mud wrestling for sure.
Nude
Yeah.
mud wrestling.
And
And Saturday's the Grow Green Fall Harvest Expo in Whitmore Lake.
Won't Michael be there
And,
too? Michael, you're speaking
Michael will
at
be
that.
speaking there, yeah.
I'm coming to buy some
And so
bulbs.
Rick and
I'll be
I-
there.
Jamie and Rick, I understand, will be
And then-
doing their
Their shtick. They're gonna-
ambiguous
uh,
duo thing that they like to do. Just
Don't
kidding.
Don't
Is
they
that
do
funny?
like
Is it
like a ventriloquist thing? One of those little
I'm
wood
kidding.
dummies
That's-
on
that's-
Jamie's lap.
We don't say anything. It's just like this homoerotic miming.
Right. Yeah.
They both will be wearing capes too. That's the costume.
And
is part of-
leotards.
and gloves.
Yeah.
And gloves.
Yeah, definitely leotards.
No shoes, like sock shoes, kind of. Were they
Yeah.
like superhero character shoes, feet,
Yeah.
or something?
That's the way I always envision them.
So then, and what I'm really happy about right now, just came back from doing some work, some staff training and stuff. A new company that I'm with, Botanical Company, opening provisioning center in East Dallas area on Sunday. We are our soft opening. So I'll be back there for that.
Nice.
I'm looking forward to that because it's been a
That's
long time
awesome.
to formally get back into this.
And there'll be
whole world.
free giveaways for everyone that shows up. Is that what you're saying, Jamie? With the
It's on Jamie.
There's of course there's swag and
Little swag.
Nobody wants any swag. would they?
Lunch boxes.
Oh, Jamie.
Nobody wants any of Jamie's swag. What
It's all
about free
good.
samples?
You got any
Hey,
free
what about what?
samples? Free samples?
No, you can't give away anything for free.
Oh.
how many cities have opted in for recreational, Mr. Lowell? Do we know?
I don't know what the number is currently.
Is there a number
It'll
that's
be a lot more years from now than it is now.
I heard Flint opted out. Is
So
that
people are going to have to take the time to get there.
No.
Flint opted out? Yeah, it did.
They opted out?
Yep.
Believe it?
What?
Wow.
Who else? I mean, is there anyone that comes to mind that is all in? I'm trying to think if there's
Berkeley.
Berkeley, right?
Opted
right.
in
We
and
talked
just,
about-
and just set up the,
Right,
the
right.
parameters for it.
Okay.
It's gonna be-
Ferndale, not yet. I know they got the.
No, Ferndale has got the medical.
Yeah, but that's not.
They have not
right,
opted in on
right.
recreational yet. They're
If
supposedly
she's going
discussing it.
for MRTMA and the person kind of spearheading it, City Council Representative Annie Somerville, also on staff for Senator Irwin, is doing a really cool and broad and liberal kind of version of it while trying to add local help to the social equity program. And so I'm not sure if that's been done yet or not. I don't believe it has. And so she's trying to take that part a little bit further, which could be a good example for some other places. Because the state has to do it to a certain degree, but the locals wanted to really embrace it. They could probably, help move that along a lot better. And then a place we're in, Baldwin Township, actually, the East Dallas address, what I understand is trying to figure out, how comfortable they are with how much activity and all the different things, but they are planning on also transitioning into MRTMA in a little while. So it's going to happen at different rates of speed for different places. The initiative might be the thing in some areas. Might have to keep on working on the council and others. Some are earnest when they opt out now, and they're trying to put together their policy to, that is going to be a thing. Although many use that excuse just to kick the can with. Obviously, they don't really want it around. But
On
it's a
that
matter of time for a lot.
On that particular topic, I know that is the standard answer by a lot of these townships and cities. However, that's what many of them said, or the excuse that was used the first time around with the MMFLA. And the complaint was that at that time the applications and the rules were coming out at the same time. Tough to read them and figure out what to do. So this time around, they did the opposite. They've published the administrative rules, knowing that there's several months yet before they'll provide the application, so the townships and cities couldn't say we didn't know what the rules were before. I don't know that hasn't backfired on them. You know what I mean? I mean, or has done the opposite, has had any impact on what they were trying to create. I mean, the purpose of them doing that, I will say, it's an opinion, was their genuine intent to do it better and learn from the mistakes of the first time around based on the way the cities interfered with the, the implementation, so to speak. And despite those attempts, if they, and they've kind of exposed the negativity of the cities, and still that there's some work to do because, okay, what can they do via administrative rule to make the market work? Well, they want to get more licenses out. And in order to do that, they need cities to opt in. And for cities to opt in, why didn't they? For MMFLA, what did they learn from all these meetings that they took and input from the various city council? We weren't sure of the rules. We didn't have a chance to do it. But sure enough, the rules came out. Now, it's been a few months. I mean, it was March. When did they come out? I forgot. March, April?
I thought it was June.
Okay. But it's been, 3, 4, 5 months. And maybe by the time the application comes around, I will be, corrected in my comments here today. Let's hope so. But I do agree that it's, there's a long way to go still. I do not like green eggs and ham. I do not like them Sam-I-am. And that's about it.
It's 10:09.
Okay.
That's it.
All right. Well, with that being said, Jamie Lowell, final word. Anything else?
So again, opening up, brand new store, new company I'm with, Sunday, 10 to 6, East Dallas, 1885, US 23.
Freebies as for Jamie Lowell.
Yeah.
We'll be giving it away. Freebies, no swag, just freebies.
Yep. Keep the t-shirts.
And hugs. Jamie will be giving hugs out as well. Do not hesitate to go up and
I'll be bringing
hug him. All right, so I think that's it. We did it. Did we cover it all? I think we did. And until next time,
Excellent show.
thank you for everybody who was listening in. And I guess if we were live on Facebook, I hope it wasn't too much.
It was fucked.
I'm sure
All
it
right.
was really intense.
We'll talk at you next time, I guess. All right?
Maybe.
Good night and
And good luck.
good luck.
Oh, what?
An important and historical farm crop in American agriculture is returned after having been classified as a controlled substance and illegal. On December 20th, 2018, the President signed the Farm Bill, also known as the Agriculture Improvement Act of 2018, into law. The signing of the act was great news for the hemp industry, which amended the definition of marijuana in the Federal Controlled Substances Act, Hemp is now defined as the plant, Cannabis sativa L, and any part of the plant, growing or not, with less than 0.3% THC concentration on a dry basis. The plant itself is no longer a controlled substance. Hemp is one of the most versatile plants on earth. From clothing, fiber, paper, building materials, hempcrete, biofuels, CBD, and medical uses, it has been a part of America's industry for over 200 years. Even the United States Constitution was drafted on hemp paper. The time is now. If you're thinking of getting in the farming or processing of hemp, contact our global experts, legal, and consultation teams to make sure that you're on the right road when you venture into the new hemp industrial revolution. Michigan Hemp Industries has been a leader and advocate for the return of the hemp industry, so come be a part of the new revolution in agriculture in Michigan.
What up, though? This is Big Snoop Dogg when you're watching Hyped Up Live Session with my main man Tony Green. And that's right, tell him Big Snoop Dogg sent you. We looking for all that new talent in the Detroit area. Let's go, D.
Yeah, you know what time it is. All the way from the legendary Russell Industrial Center in the heart of Detroit City comes Hyped Up Live Sessions with your host, your boy T-Money Green. We've created a show to bring the very best talent from Detroit, from around the world, to you sitting on your couch. It's like a couch concert, baby, as you never experienced before. You could be the next artist to perform on a Hyped Up Live stage. I know Detroit, I know the music in Detroit, and I gotta do it. You know me, or if you don't know, check it out. From the Dramatics to George Clinton to Snoop Dogg. If I said I'm bringing you the very best, I'm bringing you the very best in entertainment. Hyped Up Live sessions, the way we wish you would experience Detroit music. Couch concerts coming up.
Check this out, this your boy Warren G, and we're going hard right now with the Hyped Up Live session with my homeboy T. Brain, you better ask somebody. You don't know? No. Shut.
I was upper middle class, I had a yard of carpet grass. Worked backhoe 9 to 5 and paid my union dues. But the chef came one day and he took it all away. Left me without anything to lose. They forfeited my car, they found some sugar in a jar. Told me it was probably suspicion of a crime. The other day I saw it being driven by the law, and them boys in back was gonna do some time. Well, forfeiture today, Lord, what a funny way to pay. Keep the peace so all our kids can go outside and play, without a cotton picking thing to lose. I got the deep East Texas task force blues. Took my minibar and then they seized my VCR. They could be misused to watch a nasty video. They took away my kitchen all the time. My wife was bitching that it wasn't nothing but oregano. They said my herbal tea might cause a sinful ecstasy. Told me it could only lead to doing something hard. Took my ass to jail, they took my wife, paid my bail, took my double wide down to the county yard. Forfeiture today, Lord, what a funny way to pay. Keep the peace so all our kids can go outside and play, without a cotton picking thing to lose. I got the Oakland County task force blues. Without a cotton picking thing loose, I got them Oakland County task force blues.
Yeah!
It's time for Planet Green.
We have launched.
We have completely launched. We've started the show, and it is Planet Green Cheese. We're about to embark 2 hours of medical marijuana and marijuana reform in Michigan, and nationally and internationally, and even in Spaceland. Please welcome Tim Beck.
Oh, thank you so much, Michael. Really glad to be on the show.
Thanks for staying with us. Planet Green Cheese, episode number 395. Is that right?
Correct.
Calling it Working Man. For those that are on the end, know what that means. There's an argument that we evolved from the cannabis plant. Let's just be honest, okay?
Ow, what's going on, everybody? How y'all doing?
420th episode. Yeah! Please welcome Steve Miller.
Steve Miller. Ow!
Thank you for the kind words, Mike.
We're here now still with Q, who, as I was trying to lay some kind of foundation before all the objections came, as it happens sometimes. What kind of agenda here? I see. I usually resist agendas, and I will tell you that I'm not really going to follow this. I mean,
This is a celebratory of the 420th show. Anything goes.
Please welcome my dear friend, looking like very Dylan-esque tonight, maybe more Laszlo Dylan-esque. If there's a thing, Jeff Frazier.
The presidents have had more people at their arraignment than I have. That's really funny.
If you're a connoisseur, you're going to want the good stuff. And if you want the good stuff, you're going to go for the mom and pop stuff because that's the good stuff.
We got Jamie Lowell.
Hey, don't leave the studio.
Don't leave the studio, Jamie Lowell.
It's just a real pleasure to come here and congratulate you on your 420th show, and thank you for having me on a few times over the 420.
Hey growers, the world famous Grow Green Fall Harvest Expo is going down this Saturday, October 5th at Grow Green in Whitmore Lake.
Talk with over 100 factory reps from all the top brands, including Hortilux, Advanced Nutrients, Twister Trimmers, Hydrofarm, and Fresh Coast Seed Co.
We'll have genetic companies on site with all the latest hard-to-find strains and are hosting a clone swap so you can bring your fire clones and take home something unique and exciting.
Did we mention live music, food trucks, over $12,000 in giveaways, free samples, live trimmer demos, the lowest prices of the year on everything in the store, presentations, bounce houses for the kids, and of course, good vibes only.
Come help grow the community along with thousands of other growers this Saturday at Grow Green's Fall Harvest Expo. This event is 100% free and open to everyone, from new growers just starting out to people running state licensed facilities. We have something for everyone.
If you grow, you must go to the Grow Green MI Fall Harvest Expo happening this Saturday at Grow Green on M36 in Whitmore Lake. Click growgreenmi.com.